Now, ICE is pushing back on that proposal, saying it would make it more difficult for agents to arrest violent criminals. Maryland ICE Director Matthew Elliston says even if this bill is passed in Maryland, President Trump's executive order would override it. Other policies are being debated in Annapolis during session, including one dealing with sensitive locations. That was another policy change that we saw under the current administration. If that law passed in Maryland, would that have any real impact on your day-to-day operations?
I think the Supremacy Clause of the United States is pretty clear on this. The state doesn't get to dictate how I operate. So I would just say no. That being said, I would like to clarify our sensitive locations policy was changed for the sole reason that previously it wasn't the location itself that was off limits, it was a 2-block radius around it. So we were finding that, very savvy criminals were seeking out churches and schools to live across the street from, knowing that they would be shielded. We'd had child molesters living across the street from elementary schools that we were prohibited from arresting. That makes no sense to anybody. I'm so glad we changed that policy. And additionally, in the last Trump administration, we had an 18th Street gang member run into a church to try to get away from us. We're not letting that happen anymore.
I spoke with Elliston about ICE enforcement in Maryland, what's changing under the new administration, and the bills being debated in Annapolis right now. After going on a ride-along with ICE in Maryland, we sat down with Maryland ICE Director Matthew Elliston to learn more about the process.
We're out arresting public safety cases every single day. And as you saw that day, we arrested someone with an Interpol red notice. We were out looking for a man wanted for murder, gang members.
And when it comes to the worst go first, that is still the same policy as it was under the previous administration, but this is different in terms of who else is at risk of being detained, correct?
Right. So I would say under the last administration, it was more of only the worst, whereas this one, we're faithfully executing the laws of the United States. So if someone's here illegally in the United States and we come across them, they're going to be arrested.
What's been the mentality when it comes to the current administration for the collateral arrest? Is that, I know that it's a policy change, but is that encouraged? Are they directing you to go after them as well as the targets of the violent offenses?
So in this administration, there are no free passes, right? If we come across you and you're illegally in the United States, we're going to arrest you.
Is there a target number that you're being told that you have to go after every day in terms of people?
We have overall goals, but it's not like a quota system. Like I'm not getting in trouble when we don't, meet those numbers. It's just the expectation is that we are out faithfully executing the mission every single day.
Do you believe that there's too much of an emphasis on the numbers and not necessarily the targets themselves?
Well, I myself am kind of guilty of the numbers issue. I will say here in Maryland, we're #1 in the country at arresting sex offenders, and that is a number I'm very proud of. I think as of today, we're at 83 sex offenders. I'm hoping that we hit 200.
A bill being debated in Annapolis right now could cancel a program operating in some Maryland jurisdictions. The 287G program. Staff in detention facilities work to screen detainees for ICE detainers. And then ICE is notified of that individual. Right now, it's in place in Cecil, Frederick, and Harford counties. And according to ICE, Carroll and Washington counties' participation is pending. The 287G program and some of the other state efforts that are unfolding right now, what would it mean for you if 287G were to be canceled?
So the hardest part is that we don't always know who's in the jail and prison. And that's where 287G comes in. They're going to be the ones to identify those cases and bring them to light.
Maryland does not have a blanket statewide policy for working with ICE. Instead, it's a patchwork of plans by jurisdiction.
The Gonzalez poll that came out, almost 80% of Maryland residents agree we should be working together in a custody situation. So I don't really understand the state legislature's idea of making that more difficult. I will say I'm very proud that Maryland, as of right now, only has 2 sanctuary jurisdictions, Prince George and Howard County.
We know that the Department of Justice has announced lawsuits against New York and Illinois for their sanctuary policies. Should the 2 jurisdictions in Maryland be concerned about the potential for litigation or civil lawsuits or federal funding at risk?
I've asked the Attorney General's Office of the United States to file lawsuits against them Doesn't necessarily mean they will, but I have made that request, yeah.
Why?
So there's a great example, I think it was 2 weeks ago. They arrested a member of MS-13 that this government has deemed a foreign terrorist organization. There's no public safety, spin you could try to put on that's somehow good for the community.
ICE is getting a lot of pushback in the communities across the country as well for the enhanced enforcement that we're seeing under the Trump administration. Do you believe that is warranted, and should the immigrant communities be concerned about their families and friends?
So I would say if you have family and friends who are criminals, I wouldn't let them live with you, right? Those are the people we're going after. And the people who are, with them at the time are in, a real risk of being, held accountable for their prior illegal actions. But at the end of the day, they broke the law by being here illegally, right?
While dignity, not detention, is not a bill up for debate this year, Elliston says to lawmakers who thought passing it would send a message to ICE about not doing more enforcement.
I would say that ICE sent a message that we're just going to do it even more. Right? We may not be detaining people anymore, but we're arresting a lot more people.
As the Trump administration continues to unfold with policies evolving. Do you have any concern about the policy flip-flopping and just the dramatic changes from one administration to this administration and what happens in 4 years after this one?
What I will say, and I'm super proud of this, ICE as a whole, we are a very dynamic agency. Right? We've seen this before with policy changes. At the end of the day, we all serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States.
I'm Mary Bubala. Thank you for watching. Here's another video for you to watch. Also take some time to subscribe to our YouTube channel.